There is never a bad beer. There's only a beer that hasn't found the right food to go with it. You're gonna go, holy that worked.
We're here today in beautiful San Diego in a nice spacious tasting room.
Yes.
Distanced.
I am stoked to sit down with Gwen and Julia, the co-authors of the beer pairing book. I personally find this as the Bible when it comes to beer and food pairing. I've done a lot of beer and food pairing classes and events, and I've always referenced your book. So I'm excited to see maybe if you guys have any creative ideas with the beers that we have in front of you today.
Well, we have ideas, but
Yeah,
we
I'm
don't
sure.
know how they're gonna work. So, one of the things that Julia and I are gonna teach you is, first of all, we've never tried these beers. So there's no way for us to say, this beer goes with that item. That being the case, we need to smell and taste all of them, and then maybe we'll have an idea. There should never be anything that you go, yeah, I don't think that's gonna work. It should be more like, let's give it a try, because you never know what's gonna work and what's not gonna work. With all of these, you will see that we might have one that I go, oh my God, that's amazing. And Julia may go, no. And then Erik may go, I'm kind of in the middle of the road here. That's exactly the kind of food pairings we have.
And that's because pairing's personal, preference is personal. So if you can get 50% of the people or more in a pairing to say, home run, 1 + 1 = 5, it's a home run, right? That, you're on to something, but you're never gonna get a home run pairing for 100% of the people at the establishment.
Tasting, you might have noticed that Julia and I did this. The very first thing that you should do is you should smell it. Aroma is going to account for 80% of your flavor, your total flavor. You all know that because when you have a cold, you're like, oh my God, I can't taste anything. Well, actually you can taste. It's just that those aromas aren't there, and that aroma is super important. Not just the orthonasal, so through your nose, but also the retronasal. Also, one of the things I do is I close my eyes because you have 5 senses: the taste, aroma, mouthfeel, sight, and sound. So you look at it, you smell it, you taste it, you think about it. The sound piece is very interesting because, as you might have noticed, Erik is popping cans. As soon as he does that, that sound is a clue in your brain that goes, I'm so thirsty. What are we waiting for? My God.
Maybe your brain.
If you were on an airplane, you'd go, I'm good, I got water. And then by the time that cart gets to you and they're popping those cans all the way down, you're like, oh yeah, I don't, whatever is in a can, I'm gonna drink it because I need to hear that sound. It makes mama feel so good.
It kind of whets your appetite. It gets your brain going. Synapses are firing and you are ready to indulge. And I think the whole point of tasting beer, beverage, food is getting a sense of what's in it. Once you are dialed into that, then you can pair because you're paying attention to the 3 flavors, components, right? Flavor's a triangle, it's a fusion, it's 3 things. It is aromatic compounds. It is basic taste, sweet, salty, sour, bitter, umami, emerging oleogustus, fat, and other basic tastes. So we've got aroma, basic taste, and mouthfeel, right? Temperatures, textures, pain. And we've got both of those in the food and the beer, and part of pairing is finding synergies and marriages on those 3 elements.
So how much does bias play a role? If I see a beer is dark, am I going to perceive the taste differently?
Sensory comes from the right side of your brain. Your right side of your brain is the limbic system, and so it's tied into the limbic system. That limbic system piece is also connected to your memories, your emotions, your behaviors. So that plays a huge part in it. So if I'm tasting something and I'm like, there's going to be another piece here, and that's genetics. But if I'm tasting something and I'm like, oh, grandma's house, that makes me feel comfort. It doesn't mean that it tastes amazing. It's that memory gives you that you're like, this is comforting to me, so I enjoy this taste. On the other side of it, you could be tasting something that's like, this reminds me of, and I'm angry. Because even though we like to call it sensory science, it's very emotional. There's a lot of emotion that goes with it. So if you don't like something, onions, for me. My mother always put onions in food. I hated onions. Did I? I don't know. I'm a kid. But because she continuously did that, I don't like onions. Should I get over it? Yes. Am I going to get over it? No.
So, scientific explanation there. I'm People Magazine lady over here. Basically, I call it the mind to palate connection, right? Your palate senses all those basic tastes of aromatic compounds, your nose included, and mouthfeel, and you put a factual, you taste that. Your brain synapses are only factually getting what your palate is perceiving. But your mind is like the high school kid at a dance and in the corner gossiping. Maybe your mind is putting good stories to it. Maybe your mind is putting proper descriptors. Maybe your mind is off on a biased place where it's just applying negative and memories to what you're tasting. So the palate to mind connection is big to pay attention to, because if you just factually taste, you're going to open up your mind and your world to a lot of other things.
That is part of being sensory conscious. So if you're just drinking and you're like, oh, I like it, you're not really actively participating in what you're eating or drinking. And so one of the things that we think is really a big deal is actively participating in what you're eating and drinking. And you're going to experience something that's a whole new world, because it really is. And then these pantry pairings that we call them, that makes you want to do them, because you're like, oh my God, what would this go with? Or, oh my God, what's going to go with this?
Right, and that takes us to our 3 concepts in the book, which is home run pairings, middle of the road, and train wreck, right? And it's really hard to get to that home run. Beer and beverage and food make 1 + 1 = 5. They make each other better. Middle of the road is most of the pairings I have. The beer didn't take away from the food, but the food didn't take away from the beer. And that is okay, but that's not why you're pairing. You want things to sing. You want to have evolved types of interactions, right? But the train wreck that Gwen alludes to is that negative clash, that palate clash that you notice that you get a negative reaction from.
They are such teaching moments, because when you have a home run, like we said, there's an emotional connection to it. When you have a home run, you're like, this pairing's so good. And then you go, why? Because the ultimate question should always be for you to go, why? Why did that work? Why did that not work? Well, when it really works, you're like, and you have a hard time picking out what worked and what didn't. You're just like, oh my God, it was so good. So teaching people that is the hardest thing. When it's a train wreck, if you have something that you're there, people go, nope, I don't like that. Why don't you like that? Well, it's bitter. It made that taste too salty. It was too spicy. I did not like the way they blended together. And it's like,
Right, and then we can understand where each other is coming from just with those 3 concepts alone. If you in your head are remembering home run, middle of the road, train wreck, and then you verbalize why it was a home run, why it was middle of the road, why it was a train wreck, we are on the same page to understand what each other is experiencing.
We all have different genetic makeup. The number of taste receptor cells that we have, taste buds, taste receptor cells that you have in your mouth, vary anywhere from 7,000 to 15,000 per person. That difference is huge. Do you like really bitter?
Middle of the road bitter.
Black coffee?
I'm tea drinker.
Oh, that's right. Black coffee?
Yep.
Kale?
Yep.
Ew. Ew.
Love kale.
But that actually says a lot about your taste receptor cells.
That though, how often are you seeing an element that somebody doesn't like, but because of the beer it's paired with, they say, you know what, I can tolerate that.
That's my favorite.
Or I like
Those are the wins, but
Yeah.
it doesn't happen enough. Those are the wins.
My very favorite thing is to actually have a beer somebody doesn't like and a food somebody doesn't like, and then the two of them go together and they're like, I hate you. And you're like, why? And you're like, because I like this now. And I'm like, then I win.
Yeah.
It's very hard to say, but there is never a bad beer. There's only a beer that hasn't found the right food to go with it.
Sound like a parent.
Kind of threw a little bit of a change up at you guys today. We took the same base wort and split it up into 2 different fermenters and pitched 2 different yeast strains. So the first 2 are our 10P Czech style Pilsner, WP 802 Budweiss lager yeast, and then we have a WP 830 German lager yeast. So lagers, the strains are very similar in the general expression, so they're not going to put out the variance of flavor that you're going to see in a lot of ale strains, but they still produce different beers, right? I'm really curious to see what you two think. from a pairing angle, if that even makes a difference.
Well, less residual sugar. Attenuation alone, one's drier than the other, right? Like I can already tell. So that, to me, residual sugar, sweet calms heat. So now we talked about basic taste, how flavors of fusion with also aromatic compounds and mouthfeel tied to the basic taste. There's your flavor. But when you get flavor components, you want to make sure that you're paying attention to basic taste of sugar, because sugar in beer is something that is often really much more advanced than most wines. Most wines are much drier. So residual sugar is a balancing, interactive type of agent, and when it has residual sugar against capsaicin heat, you have sweet calming heat, and that's a pleasing interaction because it's less spicy.
We have, these are toasted coconut chips, and they are Thai chili. You get the crunch, so you got the mouthfeel.
I love
There's
crunch.
fat, and the fat here could be a basic taste if it were rancid, but this actually isn't rancid, so that's part of fat. But the fat can get cleaved, and then it can end up being a basic taste because it doesn't taste good. These have a nice fatty mouth feel, so that's different. Yeah,
Ethanol also will exacerbate heat. So the higher something is in alcohol, again back to wine, that's why wine is not great with a lot of Thai foods. You don't see it as commonly paired. Beer will be a star there.
Okay, science, fun fact, I can't help it, all right? This is like my favorite thing to talk about. It's called a TRP. It is the transient receptor potential, and it's a V1. And so this thing, oh my God, it's so fun to me because it gives you false heat. So that false heat, that impression comes from ethanol, and it also comes from capsaicin heat and like ginger, mustard, horseradish, all of those things. It will trigger this receptor cell. It isn't necessarily a taste receptor cell, but what it is it's sending a signal to your brain. It's like boom. Guess what?
Infographic in the book.
It's sending a message to your brain that you're on fire. Ricky Bobby, you're on fire. But you're not on fire. You're not on fire, Ricky Bobby. Your body doesn't know that. Your body is getting this message that you are. And so when it does that, the alcohol, so the ethanol is that with the capsaicin, so they're both sending this message to your brain, and you get like, whoo, whoo. That also goes to your central nervous system, which then goes, oh, and so now you might start to cry. Your ears get hot, your whole face gets hot, everything gets hot, you might even get sweaty. So your body's like, you're in pain, I'm gonna help you out. What does it do? It releases endorphins. That's a runner's high. How fun is that? So now you're like, ooh, I'm gonna eat more. So you just start to eat more spicy food and drink more spicy things. Well, some of us do, not all of us. I'll just say some of you don't like spicy food, okay.
Some of us don't like to run either.
I know. But all of that is the chemistry of you. So it's fun.
Yeah, physiological reaction
Sorry.
to what you're
Science
eating.
break. That one makes me so excited.
So for the next one, we have influenced hazy IPA, but we did two different yeast strains again. So we did our WLP 066 London Fog Ale yeast, which is a more traditional hazy IPA type strain. But for the next one, we did a Kvike, the 518 Opshog Kvike Ale yeast.
Crazy with the hazy.
Yeah,
Right?
and we've
I
been
mean,
seeing that those types of strains used a lot in hazy beers because they're so expressive and they put so much fruit character out, which is usually indicative of a lot of English type strains, which is generally what people are using for hazy beers. This beer definitely has a decent amount of bitterness, so I'm excited to see what it does with that heat, as you were mentioning.
That side's
Thank you. And I again get different attenuation levels from these two yeasts, same base recipe.
I love nuts. That's why we hang out. They're not too over the top. They don't have too much tannin. These in particular will give you that umami. So if you're trying in general, which is what I'm doing here, is trying to find things that might be pieces and parts of a meal, but aren't necessarily in a meal. This would emulate meat, especially something that's grilled, because you also get a Maillard reaction that goes with it. And then here we have sweet Thai chili, and we also have sriracha. So those, now we have some seasoning that go with that.
Very mild sriracha, but there, noticeable, you're getting that? Mm-hmm. And then, often beer or the beverage is like the sauce in the meal. So when you're pairing, how is that beverage acting as part of the sauce with the food that you're doing? And I love what
That
you're...
was very interesting, wasn't it?
Well, the sriracha, this could be divisive. Are you getting, now Erica, why don't you taste with us, middle of the road, train wreck, home run with any of the beers? And either of these two nuts.
I like the sriracha with the 830 Pilsner because it tames it and it almost just refreshes my palate. And I don't think the beer does anything to the food other than allows me to eat more, but it's not making it better or worse for me.
So what I got a citrus note, like a lemony note that came out of that. So I actually started with the hazies, which was interesting because the hazies made the almonds taste slightly oxidized, and I was like, oh no. But then when I come
much
over
better
to
with the pills.
Yeah, it's very good with the pills, and like all the things that you said. But then the aftertaste, I also got like this lemon citrus that came out that was unexpected. So that was very interesting.
It actually, the interaction to me, either of the nuts makes on the hazies the yeast display and almost muddies things up. It's too yeasty, right? It's too hazy and murky. I mean, I don't want that thought in my brain from drinking a juicier hazy. So the pills to me is where we would land.
And I like that first one.
So you like first?
Yeah.
You like the second?
Yeah. So knowing that you have these 4 beers in front of you, what would your process be to say incorporate another beer? What would your train of thought be for what's next, right? If you think some of these are maybe all middle of the road, some are not great, but there's potential there.
I mean, like just straight up different food.
Yeah, because we could switch. Why switch the beer when you can switch food? We're about the beer here, people, in this video. So let's stick with what makes the beer showcase the best, what brings the beer to another place. And I agree with Gwen. What's a food that we would want to switch up to bring this to a home run? Because I'm feeling like we're analyzing here now. We're into the pairing and the test tasting, but we're not hitting home run yet, right? So let's get some more food on the plate.
Well, just so you know, I'm gonna go sweet, but I like to go spicy first.
It is sweet and spicy.
I'm gonna go. We're getting Taki Fuego. You know what Fuego means? Fire.
I want this with like a San Diego red ale, like an imperial red.
Nice.
I don't think that we're getting to the place for home run for these beers, but I would slip in a really malty red, maybe like a American strong ale, maybe go to barley wine. So this is getting more spicy. Intensity is the other half of the pairing battle. So you want synergies, right, with the 3 flavor elements, aromatic compounds, basic taste, and mouthfeel. I will say that till everyone can say it back to me. And that's half the battle, is those synergies and harmonies, right? But the other is intensity. You want something that might match intensity. It's no hard and fast rule, but if you can get something as intense as these crazy ass little things, what are they called again?
Takis.
Yeah, the Takis. That's good, but they're pretty intense. So I'm going for more ethanol, more residual sugar, more boost in the beverage to match that.
These are green mango coconut balls. First nuts, now balls.
You got more in your back pocket too, I know it.
What?
None of it.
Oh, that was so fun.
What'd you do it with?
So I did 2 pills, right? So it kind of cut the spice out. But now with this, with the hazy, the first one, it's got the tartness and the coconut, and that was just fun. See, I don't have descriptors. I have to go back and taste it.
Middle of the road, home run, train wreck. What do you mean fun?
Well, so a home run for me is different than for some other people. So I like it when something changes. Like it's dramatic enough that I go, oh, that 1 + 1 = 5.
Rewarding experience is a spectrum of experiences. It doesn't just have to transform, the flavors.
And I like that there was a sweet and a tart, and there was just that fatty coconut taste, but the aftertaste is very intriguing. So there was like this little roller coaster.
Yes, and Randy Mosier taught me this. Tasting is an event, it's a movie, it's an ongoing period in time. Our brains and palates do not just discern one moment and then it's over. We are experiencing something sensory-wise, and I'm still having that capsaicin heat drift from 2 minutes ago. So that movie of beginning taste, aftertaste, mid-taste, if you really dial in your pairings, what you've got going on is going to be a home run in the longest portion of that movie you can pull off, and that's even harder to do. But yeah, it's going through these evolutions when I have this with the pills.
With the hazy, that's where it got really fun. The second hazy was very interesting because there was a point in that roller coaster where I went, nope.
Yeah, that's kind of what I experienced too.
Yeah.
The 066 to me had a lot of similarities and kind of just dropped it all.
Yeah.
And became synonymous, whereas the 518 kind of was disjointed a little bit.
That's the difference between ballasts and not ballasts. So here, I liked this because I didn't get it as like what you were talking about. But I had a lot of capsaicin going on. maybe this goes with this and you eat them at the same time.
Well, I'd like to get some fat in the equation. Can we get the cheese going?
Each month I get 3 different very funky cheeses. They have some funky cheese.
So it's our Franken Stout. It's an imperial stout brewed with 96 yeast strains.
Did you do it 96 different points in time? 96 yeast
No,
strains
so
at once?
It starts with a mixed culture. It's grown up, and we cut it with a little bit of California ale yeast because the Belgian strains are very dominant with their flavor expression. And
2 of the 96. We got 94 yeast left to talk about. What happened? I don't understand.
This is very between a double and a quad. Really,
Yeah.
It's very, very big.
Yeah,
mix
the
there.
yeast is taking it
Very
way
big
beyond
mix there.
stout.
But it shows how much yeast affects
Wow.
beer style, right? Because you think if you have the right hops, the right malt, the right gravity, some of the right yeast, that it's going to be within that
Yeah,
style,
Belgian
but
quad, I
it's
like
obviously not, right?
Yes.
It's much more Belgian forward than it is as an American or English imperial stout.
So it's got that level of yeast notes that is just such a showcase.
Yeah, this beer, because it's so intense, I've always enjoyed with food more than on its own. Being in San Diego, you know, our winters, our falls here are 70 degrees. Compared to back east or Colorado, you know, you might enjoy a really big, heavy beer.
We have cheddar on our plate right now, right? And
Yes,
refresh us
but,
again?
That's a cloth-bound Cabot cheddar.
Okay.
But this, oh yeah, just smell that funky baby.
Yeah, this is the funky one.
Oh yeah, huge barnyard.
So
Funky
Joanne
baby.
was smart because she went for intensity match. So she pulled a beer that we didn't even have on the table. That's part of that test tasting and the steps you go through. In your arsenal, either change up the beer or change up the food.
Oh, barnyard.
Really cheap and goaty.
Like to me, it's just like horse blanket. And so that was kind of that phenolic characteristic that was coming out when you guys were talking about that. But there's all those different phenols that have come out that are like that mousy horse blanket thing, and that has so much crazy going on right there.
Yeah, I mean, and it gets that caprylic from the cheese almost, that goatiness, but it's not a beer flavor. The beer is clean. The beer is so solid, but it accentuates in that funky
Fun
cheese.
fact: Capra means Capra actually means goat.
Oh, she is
In
riffing.
Latin.
You're riffing off what I said. I love it.
So the cheddar is
Okay, I'm
really
going to cheddar.
acidic comparatively.
So where did you go? Which direction now are you going? So part of what we were doing as we're pairing, you're narrowing down all of these different things. So you're like tasting things and you're like, okay, now I have these different pieces, which way will I go? As I do that, because I also like to combine things, at this point you have enough things, you try individual components, you also might start combining these components. And this will be a way that you would actually make a dinner. Because now you're taking the pieces and parts and putting them together.
To expand on that a little bit more, how do you suggest that somebody develops the ability to describe what they're tasting? Because what I've seen a lot is they know what they're tasting, and you know what they're tasting, and you can see the expression, but they can't articulate it.
You have a sensory wizard in your head. That's what I was talking about. This is a little like, okay, I always think of Men in Black right here, where it's like the little, right? I'm like, but that's your sensory wizard. If you just close your eyes and watch the image of what's coming to you, it's there. Don't overcomplicate it. Stop overcomplicating.
Unleash your sensory wizard.
Yeah.
Let your wizard speak. Right? And mine's the mind to palate connection, right? Physically, what are you tasting flavor-wise in the fusion of flavor? What aromatic compounds, what basic taste of sweet, salty, sour, bitter, umami, and what mouthfeel of temperature, textures, and pain. Physically, let yourself taste that and mentally say, factually, I need to describe this. Don't put a story to it. Don't allow bias to creep in. Describe it. It's like really hard to do, and I know, like I always talk about, you wake up from a dream and you're like, oh my God, I just had the craziest dream. As soon as you try to journal it or tell somebody else about the dream, the words fall away. But the more you try to describe those dreams in the morning, the more you try to journal it, the better it is easy to explain. So that is what I think you should do with pairing.
You just have to start simple.
Describe what you're getting.
Oh, I don't like that. I don't like that at all. It didn't trigger my pairing passion. And I think maybe that's a good spot to end. What
With that said,
triggers your pairing passion? It can be as nutty as we are.
I don't know if that's possible.
You really can. Don't be afraid. And don't ever stop and go, well, I think it's going to go with this. It won't go with that. Because I'll tell you what, there's going to be probably 45% of the time that you're going to go, holy that worked.
With that said, I appreciate you guys coming for an air cheers.
No touch.
Awesome.
Thank
Cheers,
you.
guys.
Thank you, White
Thank
Labs. Thank you guys for watching.